So we want to know what's going on here. Why is it that we seem to be afraid of something that we definitely know does not exist? So what Walton does in the third part of his essay is just lay out some machinery that he's going to help use to answer that question. So first thing he does is make a distinction between things that are true and things that are what he calls fictionally true. So just regular truths are things that are just, true. Like Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan because, well, there's this person and her name's called Gretchen Whitmer and she is the governor of Michigan. So it's true that Gretchen Whitmer is the governor of Michigan. In contrast, well, there's this novel, this story about Harry Potter, who's a wizard. Now, Harry Potter doesn't actually exist. There is no boy who is named Harry Potter and who is a wizard. And yet we say all the time, well, yeah, of course, but Harry Potter is a wizard. So Walton says, look, that's fictionally true. It is fictionally true that Harry Potter is a wizard, even though it's not just plain old true that he's a wizard because, well, wizards don't exist and Harry Potter doesn't either. Same thing with Hamlet being killed by Laertes. That's fictionally true, not just plain true. It's fictionally true that Moana has black hair and fictionally true that Sherlock Holmes lives at 221B Baker Street. Well, the next thing Walton does is say, well, you can take some of these fictional truths and put them together in a big group to create something that he calls a fictional world, which is just a big group of fictional truths. So you can think of a novel like Harry Potter as creating a fictional world, a whole big group of fictional truths, like that Harry Potter is a wizard and he goes to Hogwarts where Dumbledore is the principal and he meets Hermione and Ron, and all of this is fictionally true, even though none of it is just plain true, because none of that stuff actually exists. So we can create these fictional worlds, and what Walton wants to figure out is, well, how can we create these things? So he points out first, well, one thing we can do is just imagine fictional worlds. So all we have to do is just imagine that we've developed a vaccine for COVID-19, and poof, what do you know? Now there is a fictional world and a fictional truth such that there is a vaccine for COVID-19. Now, unfortunately, there is not a vaccine for COVID-19, so it's not just plain true that there's such a vaccine, but we've created a fictional truth that there's this vaccine for COVID-19 by imagining a fictional world in which that is the case. Another way that you can make a fictional world is by engaging in a game of make-believe, by which Walton just means exactly what you might think, the kinds of games that you and I used to enjoy playing when we were kids. And so what he does next is try and give some general characterizations of what it is we do when we play games of make-believe. So his general account is that, well, what kids are doing when they're playing make-believe is just creating some general principles and then acting in accordance with those principles. So a good example is to imagine some kids playing mud pies. They're playing make-believe, and there's some general principles that govern how that game works. So some of those principles are stuff like, well, the globs of mud are pies, and that those pies are the same size as the globs of mud that they're using. But notice that the globs of mud don't have the same dirt content as the pies. So the pies inherit their size from the globs of mud, but they don't inherit the dirt content from the globs of mud. And we could operate under the general principle that the old stump is an oven. So now, making this game of make-believe, we can create a bunch of fictional truths, like that there is a pie in the oven. If we put a glob of mud in the old stump, well, then it's fictionally true that there's a pie in the oven. If Sally makes 2 blocks of mud, then it's fictionally true that Sally has made 2 pies. If Rachel makes a glob of mud that's bigger than her hand, well, then it's fictionally true that there is a pie that's bigger than Rachel's hand. And so now what Walton is able to do is say, aha, works of art, they can use these fictional worlds and games of make-believe in an interesting way that can explain our dilemma. So that's what we'll study in just a bit.